standpoint of a child and a father. If you have not made peace with your father, if you haven't told him that you love him, or told him that you hate him, or told him that you forgive him, if that is still happening and the separation is still there and the estrangement is still there, and then he dies, you as the son are often left with all the baggage. You are the one who says, man, you know, maybe I should have said that, or I wish I had seen him more, or whatever. So I think the most important thing that a child can do to prepare for the death of a father, and this obviously goes for older people who can prepare, but the best thing to do is to try to bring that relationship to completion. Try to get to the place where nothing has been left unsaid and nothing has been left undone.
So in a sense, Neil, you're kind of grieving the future that you didn't have, because there's a lot of unfinished business, it sounds like.
Well, that's definitely true. If you don't have that, you're still waiting for him to say, you know, I'm proud of you, or you're a good kid, or I love you. And if he doesn't say that, and you've never had that, then right, you are going to continue to grieve and continue to feel pain from that. If you can approach him and try to make a resolution in that, first of all, it's very likely that he may reach back to you. He may not know how to initiate it, but he may reach back to you, and that may get you to the place where you do feel the love and pride that he has in you. So I'm always encouraging people to make peace with anybody who is dying in their life.
Well, the interesting part about this quickly is that I think there's a belief system that's not true out there, that if you have an estranged relationship with someone, that you really don't grieve that hard for them. And what you're saying is it's very difficult. It can be very difficult if you were estranged.
Exactly. In fact, I'm saying almost the opposite of that. That
yes.
When you have a good relationship, there is a very intense feeling at the beginning. But as time goes on, weeks, months, years, you think back about that person and you smile. If, on the other hand, you haven't made peace, you might not feel quite that much of an intense loss at that first moment, but you're never going to look back and smile. And so it's going to be this ongoing struggle in dealing with it.
So we've got some of the, let's run over them real quick, and then let's move on to Jenny and stay on Neil, because we'll have some questions, I'm sure, for you at the end. These complicating factors are youth, younger estrangement, suddenness, and suicide. Tough topics. Well, Neil, thank you, and we'll look forward to talking a little bit at the end.
Great.
All right. Heidi, do you want to introduce our next guest?
So our next guest is Jenny Lee Wheeler, and Jenny is a teenager. Jenny, how old are you, 16?
I'm 18 now, actually.
18, okay. Jenny is 18 right now, and her dad died when she was only 14, and she grieved differently from adults and wanted to reach out to other teens, which I love because I did my doctoral dissertation on teenage grief. And she wrote the national award-winning book, Weird is Normal When Teenagers Grieve, which helps grieving teens and the adults who care about them. Great book, and I wrote the foreword to it. I would recommend it. It has won 2 silver awards in the prestigious National Nautilus Book Award Competition, 2011, very recently. Congratulations, Jenny.
Oh, thank you.
And there's the cover, and it is available on Amazon or wherever books are sold.
So Jenny, how old were you when you started writing this book?
I think I was about 16. It only took me a few months, actually, to do the whole manuscript. So, so I started.
Go ahead.
Yeah, just a couple years after my dad died, I started writing it.
Yeah, I love that picture, by the way, of you and your dad together.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, and you just graduated from high school, which is tough. I bet that was tough not having him with you.
Yeah. Yeah, I've definitely felt grief about that, especially.
Yeah, and was there anything special that you did connected with that?
Not necessarily. I did just sort of basic graduation things, but just sort of at the party and stuff, I'd sort of think like how proud of me he would be and things like that, because it's a special time in my life. And I think my mom grieved a bit more about that he wasn't here to see me graduate from high school. But definitely I've been thinking about that.
And you've told yourself good things, which I think is great. Well, talk a little bit about some of the survival tips for grieving teens. I know you've got some great ones here.
Oh, yeah. Okay, first of all is to remember that you're not alone at all. And I know that especially it's sort of a teenager thing that sometimes we like to think that, oh, that no one understands my feelings or that I'm completely unique in this situation. But actually, if you remember that there are actually lots of people who have gone through maybe even not the same thing, but something similar or some sort of loss at a young age, then it'll help to feel less alone. Like when my dad died, I started realizing that I grieve differently from adults. And at first I was thinking, oh, like, what's wrong with me? And then I realized that it's probably a teenager thing. So it made me feel better to think that there are a lot of other people who, even some people who I know, who have lost someone at this age.
Well, and Jenny, it's good to think of yourself as not being alone because, like you said, you don't teenagers often don't talk about their losses, and sometimes you don't know that other teens have gone through it, and you can feel very isolated because being 14 and not having a dad is a very unique experience. So it sounds like it was helpful for you even to look at other people that had any kind of loss and thinking, okay, other people have had losses.
Yeah, because when I was 14, I thought back to some of my friends who had lost a parent or someone close, and even at an earlier age, and then I realized, oh, like now I know maybe more how that person feels. So it definitely felt better to know that I wasn't alone.
I love the fact that you say that it's normal to grieve in the ways that seem weird to adults. You're a teenager. That is so great. Because, you know, I remember when Scott died, Heather wore her headphones all the time, you know, and listened to music and whatever.
Yeah, and definitely for a teenager, it's sort of similar to what Neil was saying about how, oh, even if men don't seem like they're grieving, that really they are, and it's just in a different way. It's similar with teenagers, because I guess because we're going through a lot anyway, just sort of emotionally and developmentally and just with chemical levels and everything. And but if you have a loss, then especially it would be strange. And I've gone through things like, for instance, I started noticing that I grieve differently when my mom would become sad about my dad passing away, when there would be something like a song coming on the radio that would make her think of him, or it would be his birthday or something, and I would be fine at those events or things, and she would check on me and be like, oh, are you doing okay today? It's his birthday or it's their anniversary or something. I'd be like, oh, yeah, I'm doing fine. And then there are some things like one thing that I cried hardest about was when his favorite microwave oven died, and I didn't really realize that I was grieving at first. And then there was a few minutes later, and I'm like, why am I crying? And I was telling that to my mom. I'm like, honestly, I don't know why I'm crying right now. And then I realized, oh, wait, that was the one that my dad always used because we had two. And then it was just one of my favorite memories of him because he was sort of meat and potatoes and TV dinner type of person, so he would always warm it up in there. And so, yeah. So
it was a connection to him. And I like that you're saying, Jenny, you're making a good point. I'm seeing some similarities here between men and teens because, like you're saying here, don't suck it up. So there are teens that will suck it up and hide their grief just as and grieve in a different way, just as men might grieve in a different way than women. So there are some overlap, which is interesting.
And talk about synchronicities.
Yeah. Yeah, and about the not sucking it up bit, that especially is important for anyone, but also for teens, because sometimes teens could feel forgotten and whatever, and there's not a lot of like literature or support or anything for teens grieving, because there's a lot of things for like kids grief support, and then for just general or like adults sort of one size fits all, but for teenagers there's not a lot. But I find that it sounds like some people would feel like they have to, I don't know, stay strong or not show it if they have other siblings or things like that. But sucking it up, again, it's sort of, I guess it would be like having unresolved things with the person who died, but even if you don't. But it's similar to that where it would just keep on stuffing it inside and it might sort of eke out later and then turn into anger or things. So, yeah.
Well, I've got a question for you as we go. I think we've got another survival tip slide. Is that right? Or
yeah.
Yeah. While we go to that one, I want to ask you, we just had somebody send us an email, and it's from Susan, and she says she's a teenager, or, you know, I don't know when her dad died, but she said, Jenny, do you worry about how to help your mother with Father's Day rather than taking care of yourself?
Yeah, I mean, my mom's a really strong person, and so I don't really worry about her so much. But yeah, I've noticed that, especially since right now, like I mentioned, it seems harder on her that I'm graduating and that my dad isn't here with me. So yeah, I've thought about, in fact, just today my mom said, oh, well, what do you want to do for Father's Day? And so I was thinking, oh, I don't know, because there are things that we've done in past years, like go to Home Depot, which he loved. He was like a tool fix-it guy, so we'd just go there and buy things to fix the house like he would, or watch car races like he would do. But yeah, definitely I'll think about what it is that I want to do, and also my mom too, to keep that into account.
So do you sometimes, Heidi talks about the fact that sometimes kids worry more about their parents than they do themselves, and don't feel like they have the right to grieve even. Would that be right, Heidi?
Yeah, or you just get so worried about your parents that you kind of hide your grief in front of them because you don't want to upset them because they've been through so much.
Right, yeah, that's another thing about like sort of the sucking it up concept, but it's important to remember that if two people can grieve together, then it'll be stronger than one person trying to hide it because they think, oh, I don't want to make so-and-so upset or something like that. So.
Talk about these grief attacks that might be triggered and seem weird.
Oh, yeah. Well, there's the thing about my dad's microwave oven, and then there was one time where it was actually while he was still alive, and I had sort of started grieving because I realized that he wasn't going to live very long. But there was a theme park nearby to our house that he would take me to all the time, and he would take me more than my mom would, and we would go since I was a young age. And I saw something in the paper about it closing, and people were talking about it at school, and I felt fine at first, but then as soon as I opened up my mouth to tell my mom, oh, by the way, the park is closing, then I just started crying, and I didn't realize why until I realized that my dad took me to it. So I guess some of the things that I realized that it's probably because I'm the age that I am are things like, I don't know, just where I shouldn't feel strange or other teens shouldn't. If it's something, I don't know, spontaneous or unexpected, or if you don't realize that it's because you're missing your dad at first, but it really is.
Now, I know that our audience is going to want to know, how did your dad die, and what was his name?
Oh, his name was Jerry with a G. So a lot of people got that wrong. So that's just sort of a funny thing because they would spell it with a J. And he got cancer. I think it's non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. But it was already pretty advanced by the time we discovered it because he had hardly any symptoms, which I guess was good because he didn't suffer or he wasn't in pain at first until it was already pretty advanced. And then he died about a month or two later after he was diagnosed.
Wow, that's really fast, Jenny. That's like a sudden loss.
Yeah.
How old was he?
He was 54.
Wow, he was young, and that was very sudden.
Yeah. Oh, wow. So sorry. Now, to talk to us about teens healing in their own way and on their own schedule, I love that, Jenny, because, you know, I just think of myself as a parent, I must say, knocking on the door and saying, are you all right? You know, is everything all right? And not
especially if you can hear kids crying on the other side.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so definitely I would say that it's important to remember that teenagers especially, as well as anyone, need sort of the right and space to grieve on their own amount of time. So like if it seems like it's delayed at first and they're not grieving at first, or vice versa, if it seems like it's drawn out, and just so I know that some people sort of think that grief is sort of a thing that should take a certain amount of time. So then they would think that, oh, maybe something's wrong with so-and-so if like they're still grieving and it's a year or two later and they seem really upset still. But that especially teenagers need time to just grieve in their own way and however long it takes them.
Now, talk about finding a person. Who did you find, and what do you say to other kids out there? Because Heidi, I think she's doing extremely well, don't you? It's amazing.
Well, she is. That does seem like she's doing extremely well. I've got to tell you, though, teens are very good at hiding what's going on. And I think Jenny probably is doing well, and there's also two sides of us. There's the side that we let the world see, and then there's our private side internally. And, you know, when you've had a dad die and a sibling die, et cetera, you got those two sides going on because, of course, we miss them. So I don't know. Jenny can speak to that more than me, probably.
Oh, yeah. Well, I do feel like I'm doing well, and definitely writing the book helped me. A lot of people ask me if writing that helped, because one thing that I even mention in my book, and I think in one of the slides, is that even if you can't talk to people, then to maybe try to do something else, like, I don't know, like play music or write or just do something that makes you think of that person, or not, just expresses your emotion in general. So writing this for sure helped me.
Yeah, and I want to tell you today, you're for sure helping a lot of people out there, too, by telling your story.
I agree with my mom. I love how we have the teen voice, because who better to talk to teens than a teen?
Absolutely. Well, so tell us, who did you find as that one person that helped you with yourself, or a friend or a teacher? Were there some special people, and how do you suggest that kids find that person?
Well, mostly for me, that was my mom. And I know that wouldn't necessarily be the case for everyone, because some people feel like their parents aren't necessarily the person that they would most want to talk to. But even though I happen to share a lot of my grief with my mom, even though we weren't grieving the same way. So that's an important thing to remember, is even if you're not grieving the same way as another person or family member, it doesn't mean that it wouldn't help if you would talk to each other about it. But definitely, I think just if you feel like there's someone who's just really encouraging, or who you feel like you can trust and you can talk to, and whatever, just sort of whatever emotions you're feeling, it's safe to share with them. Like, you know that they'd still care about you and not think that you're completely off the wall, or just sort of that kind of trust where you can share whatever.
Right. Well, let's go on to our next guest, because I know there are going to be some people thinking out there about these teen things, and we want to get we'll get some more questions there. So stay on, Jenny.
Okay.
And thank you.
Thanks, Jenny. Okay, our next guest is Mitch Carmody, and Mitch is a longtime friend of ours and someone that we have presented with for a few years now. He's a contributor to Open to Hope. He's a sought-after national speaker for many keynote presentations. He's fabulous as a keynote. He conducts numerous workshops on surviving the loss of a loved one. He's author of Letters to My Son, A Journey Through Grief, and Letters to My Son, Turning Loss to Legacy. He's a staff columnist in Living with Loss magazine and a trained hospice volunteer. Mitch has helped many loved ones and their families through the dying process. Welcome, Mitch.
Hello.
Hello, hello. And
there
is his book with his wonderful son on it, and then this wonderful picture with this heart.
Now, Neil, excuse me, Mitch, can you tell us about your son and what his name was and how he died?
Yeah, Kelly James, it was 1987 when he died of a brain tumor. We fought it for several years. He had a medulloblastoma, and so we did everything we could to save his life, and it took us on a very life-changing event, and then after he died, another whole life-changing event. So it's been quite a ride.
And Mitch, he has the most beautiful, intense eyes. How old was he when he died? Wasn't he like young, 9?
He was 9 years old when he died.
That's what I thought. Wow.
Yeah, he just
that is very intense.
Just turned 9 November 16th, and he died December 1st. So.
Wow. Oh my gosh, that's another fast.
Yeah, we had Thanksgiving, his birthday, and then his death day, all in a row.
Wow, Mitch.
Those three, the fall comes around again, and it's still, Thanksgiving is still, has that touch to it. That.
Yeah.
And how many years has it been for you, Mitch?
24.
Yeah.
And, just seeing him on the couch eating that last drumstick with his head shaved, and, that's all he can barely hold it up. But he still, excuse me, those memories come back. But it's been, there's also been a lot of good things that have come into my life because of what has happened in his life, because of his short life and what has happened in our life. Following that, it's made a huge ripple effect, and I'm just excited about that. So it is very sad, but there's some good things that should come.
Right. Well, let's get into some of these tips for grieving dads. First of all, as Heidi pointed out when we were getting ready for the show, Mitch is an artist, and he actually did that art. And when did you do that piece, Mitch? How long ago has it been?
Probably about three or 4 years ago. I started just working on a drawing for a magazine article on grief, and I wanted to do a picture of grief, and realized there's a lot more than just one picture of grief, so I ended up doing 20 of them, just different components of the grief journey. And I thought this one, when talking about dads, this one represented that dad look, just that,
right. Well, it's really
that's powerful. It pretty much says it all right there.
Yeah, it does. So give us some tips this Father's Day for grieving dad. Did you find Father's Day difficult for you the first year around?
Yes, I did. Because I had, I like Neil's delayers, and I did, when I lost my dad at, when I was 14, as Jenny lost her father at 14, and so I found myself being a dasher there, just dashed through it and got over it. Didn't even grieve, But with my son, you know, it's harder. So when Father's Day came around, it's just like, you know, wow, I never got to know my dad as a friend. And then my son, I had hopes for that. Someday I'd be able to hoist a beer with him, you know, and be his friend. And that never happened. So I felt so ripped off on both ends that when Father's Day came around that first year, I just took the day off and stayed home and just felt miserable because I couldn't celebrate either side of it, you know. And it took quite a few years to actually face Father's Day and realizing, looking at the other blessings, that I'm still a dad. I am still a dad. And that's what brought Father's Day back, knowing that
you still have a son.
I still have a son. He's an active part of my life. And bringing him back is what brought Father's Day back to where it's not as painful. Before it was just the painful of the loss. But when we realize it's not a total loss, it helps alleviate that pain, and, you know, a little bit. Incrementally, it takes a long time to get there, but.
Yeah, so you took time off from work.
I took a long time off. Like, I've never worked his actual anniversary date. I take that day off. My wife takes that off. We've always taken that day off. And reduce on that, you know, or like on Father's Day, is to don't make a lot of commitments. Don't make plans. Know that this is going to be a difficult day. Plan ahead of time. And sometimes we realize that the angst prior to the day sometimes is even worse than the day itself. And so if we prepare for it, make a plan for it, we realize when the day comes, maybe we can actually do something positive that day too. You know, it's all up to the individual.
So, and watch old movies. I like that photograph. Now, do you have other kids?
Yes, I have a daughter, Megan, who's almost 30 years old.
Yeah. The reason I say that is because, Heidi, give him your thing about when I say you can go to bed and pull the covers over your head. You know what I'm talking about?
Right. Yes, Mitch. Yes, I do. So how old was your daughter the first Father's Day?
Oh, about 5 or 6 years old.
See, that's, I think, an issue that the families grapple with. I mean, here you are, and you're pulling the covers over your head, but then there's this little girl in your life that's wanting to celebrate Father's Day. And how do dads balance that?
Oh, that is difficult. That's where you depend on your wife and the moms to help out when you're, you know, like we help each other out. When you're feeling so lonely, she can help plan activities to make Dad feel better. So. And
I bet sometimes you drag your butt out of bed and just put on the mask until you get through it.
Yeah.
If you have to.
Yeah, and if she just, and you know, she does on her own, comes in and just crawls in and just says, this thing. Sometimes that helps. You know, it depends on the day. You don't know. Like I say, sometimes the angst of it happening is worse than the day itself, and all it takes is, you know, as Megan, you know, she was, as you know, as Heidi knows, it's hard when you lose your sibling, and she had a lot of tummy aches and a lot of problems for quite a few years. You know, immediately following the loss.
So what are you going to do this Father's Day?
This Father's Day? Oh, have the grandbabies over.
No.
I just had them over this weekend. They are the best thing that ever happened to my life. I thought I'd reached a certain level, a plateau of joy that, well, okay, I'm up here again. I'll never be really jump up and kick my heels happy again after Kelly died, but I could attain some semblance of joy. Until my granddaughters were born, and I realized, wow, I can reach a higher level of joy.
You're actually kicking your heels again.
I am kicking my heels, yes. And I'm climbing trees, and I'm doing, you know, I mean, I'm really enjoying the days so much more now that when my granddaughters are over. I stop and take everything off. I just do with them and just.
And I'm wondering if your granddaughters, I mean, they're little. Does it ever remind you of times you spent with Kelly?
Oh yes, a lot.
Yeah, I bet.
And it makes me, again, it's funny how when you say that, to go back and look at, no, I'm proud of the dad that I was. And sometimes we have misgivings, like the Harry Chapin song, The Car Keys, where, you know, I just didn't do enough, I didn't say I love you enough, I didn't play enough, I worked too much overtime. And I look back and, you know, no, I was a good dad. I spent a lot of time with the kids. I worked midnight shifts, so I spent a lot of time with the kids during the day. And so I had, you know, it's Neil talked about that, regrets, having regrets. Regret is one of the hardest things. And sometimes we take an inventory of ourselves and look back, and that's why I talked a little bit further down about the list of 10 things you truly are grateful for. You know, look at what you are grateful for. And that can help buoy you up on that bad day.
Well, and it might be just that you're, I mean, one of the things early on could be, I'm grateful that I had Kelly in my life for 9 years.
Oh, yes. Oh, totally. Yeah, but it took a while to come to that realization, to actually say that.
Mm-hmm.
I was just grieving his loss so much.
And you wanted him in your life for so much longer.
I wanted him. I don't know when that magic, when it, when he was dead longer than he was alive, or I don't know what part in the journey where all of a sudden it changed. But it's embracing. I think when I went back and embraced him, it made him part of my life again, and not burying him with his body and his memory. That brought him back as like a friend and I can talk to, and so I don't grieve as much, because not as much as gone as I thought was gone.
Mitch, we've got a question here from somebody named Ramon, who says, I heard Mitch say something about anger. What do you do with that? My child was died a couple of years ago, 2 years ago, my son, and I'm angry.
And anger is a normal, primal reaction, and we are angry, and to let it out appropriately. It's not as deleterious to put it inside and stuff it. If we're angry, is to let it out and cathartically write it on paper. Put it a letter to the editor. I mean, write it out. Put the anger out. That helps. Physically, when I was so angry when my son was diagnosed, but that was back in the diagnosis, but it's still the anger. We went to a junkyard, and we took tire irons out of the back of the trunk of one car, and we told Kelly and I smashed every headlight we could find.
Oh my gosh, I love that.
It just felt
as a way
so
of just releasing
good
anger.
to physically let that anger out. And then Mothers Against Drunk Drivers joined together and made a huge difference in this world by saving lives with their anger. So if it's channeled, is find some way to channel it, and not that's going to hurt somebody, but yet it's going to do some good things.
Neil was talking about how men, sometimes in their styles tend to build or whatever, and I'm thinking maybe that's the reason they do, Neil. I'm thinking maybe it's some of the anger.
With Chris Munch and his birdhouse project, oh my God, I just spent some time last week at the International Grief Conference in La Crosse, and what he's doing in reaching teens and really angry people, and they get it out. And I mean, he was talking about one kid that was just banging. He's gone to cardboard ones now because some of the kids get really, but they're letting it out. They get the hammer in their hand, and it's all their anger about why this has happened. They may not understand it, even a child, why their dad died, but yet there's this anger there that he's gone.
Do you think that you could have expressed as a teenager your anger more had you had that opportunity to know that you could let it out?
Oh, yes. I was 14, and my mom said I'm the man of the family now, and I shut up, I clammed up, I didn't cry, I didn't emote, I yucked it up with my buddies. I was the kid whose dad died kicked the bucket over the summer, and I started 9th, 10th grade next year, and it was over and gone with, and he was put behind. But I didn't, until I lost my son and lost my twin sister, and I mean, I didn't deal with my dad's loss until I had to deal with the physical issues that I had, and I had to go back and relive and cry and let out the emotion from my father that I'd stuffed at 14. But in order to take on the huge grief of my son, I had to go back and grieve for my father. So it's never too late as men to go back and grieve some of the things that even if it's not a death, it can be a huge grievance of the loss of moving out of town or of a best friend when you were a child. There can be a lot of grief that you never expressed. And,
well, like you're saying, Mitch, sometimes our current losses bring up our past losses that maybe we haven't fully grieved for.
Right. Oh, yeah. And that brings it up and we find out when it's so enormous that we can't hold any more grief in, that we have to go back and try to relive or experience some of those griefs.
I love the fact that you said it's never too late. When we had Candy Leitner, who started Mothers Against Drunk Driving, we've had her on the show, and she's also in our new book on Open to Hope, Inspirational Stories of Hope and Loss and Recovery. Candy told us that she started MAD 3 days after her daughter was killed by a drunk driver, and she said her advice is grieve now because she had to go back 3 years later and deal with her grief, and you went way back. So that's, getting
and
back
I
to
went
those,
way back, and
to those
even
layers.
talking when I, not just when I heard Jenny talking too, and I know other authors in grief that I've over the past 10, 15 years that I've met, that sometimes when we get so busy at the beginning with our grief and working in positive grief and doing things and writing, and we go, that sometimes we actually delay our own stuff a little bit, and we have to go back and, wow, I was so busy, I was doing so much, I was a doer, but yet I got to go back and sometimes it just, let it out and scream.
Right.
So Neil, one more thing. When you say ask for a sign, what do you mean?
Oh, asking for a sign. Yeah, when my son, I asked him for a sign. I wrote him when I was writing my book. I wrote him a letter, and I said, Kelly, give me a sign growing in our yard, something specific, and a cornstalk grew in our yard, and then with the letter D-A-D written on this cornstalk. It was something that profound,
Wow.
and I asked for it. And I didn't know about, when I first lost Kelly, I didn't know about signs. It wasn't that much talked about. And so in talking about it and bringing it open, and that on Father's Day, if you wait the whole week ahead of time while you're pining and waiting for the day to happen, ask for a sign, something that's significant to your father or your son, and be open to it and look, and that's why I say take the day off too. It goes in conjunction with that. Take time to look around, see everything around you, and they can caress us with something so subtle and so wonderful. Sometimes it takes a little work to ask for it and take the walls down that prevent us from seeing it.
Right, and I think, Jenny, you have had some signs, haven't you?
Yes, yeah, definitely. I think I kind of forgot to mention that. But even today, actually, it's really interesting. On some occasions when my mom and I have gone somewhere to do some sort of public speaking about signs, I'll usually see some from my dad, like on that day or stuff like that, which makes it even more significant. Like today, of course, I've been thinking about how, of course, I was going to do this webinar. And then especially I was thinking about him because I am going to take his car to college with me. And I was trying to decide what car to have. And recently I've decided that I am going to still take that car, which I've been driving. And so I was just driving somewhere today thinking about that. And then I look over and there's a frog, which is something that he particularly sends me because it has personal significance.
Wow, that's nice.
Wow, that's neat. And I love the fact that you're taking something that was so important to him with you, driving his car. That's wonderful.
And Neil, we've got a question from Cora, and she wants to know where you came up with your men's styles of grieving. She's very taken by those. Are those your own?
Those are my own. I explained it in FatherLoss, and really what they did, it was at first I was trying to use more of the traditional, first you go through this phase and then you go through this phase, and I was going to write about how men were really bad at going through the phases and they didn't know what they were doing, and how could we fix men and make them better. And then as I got further along and just got to the point where I stopped trying to force them in and just opened up to what these men were telling me, I started to see them line up in these different ways. So it was one of those things where I had to set aside my preconceptions of what was wrong with men and what was wrong with me and what was wrong with the way we grieve, and realize that everybody has their own way, and whether you're a man or a woman, and that should be honored as long as you're not hurting anybody else.
Right.
Don't you agree, Neil, that once you become a displayer, it's hard to go back?
That is, I did hear that from people, right. Once you start crying, you realize that it actually feels pretty good.
Yeah,
and to a large extent, what I heard when I read some research talking about the differences in men and women is that while yes, men do cry less, that's one of the reasons why it takes men a little bit longer, because crying is a good, it facilitates feeling better. But if you can't get there, or just for psychological or biological or whatever reason you can't get there, then there are other ways to accomplish the same thing, which is to kind of remove that terrible tension and pain within you. That's why those things like building something or writing your father's guitar, or I always I wear my grandfather's ring and my other grandfather's watch, and so on my left hand I can always be connected to my two grandfathers.
That's great.
That's great.
That helps me, makes me feel good.
Well, let me, as we close this Father's Day webinar, I wonder if everybody could give us a little thought on Father's Day, either any kind of piece that you have or anything you're going to be doing, or you want to start out, Jenny, and give us some advice for teens on Father's Day, or what you'll be doing, or just any comment?
Sure. Yeah. Something that I would suggest is, if you're feeling, I don't know, sort of emotionally ready enough, then maybe try doing something that helps you think of that person, maybe something that your dad liked doing, and just sort of do it, I don't know, either with your other family members or just by yourself, or just, I don't know, light a candle for him or go out and do something that he liked doing. Like in previous years, I've mentioned I went to Home Depot or things like that, and this coming Father's Day, I'll just kind of see what I feel like doing on that particular day, or I don't know, eat something that my dad liked eating, like for breakfast, or go out to a favorite restaurant or something like that, or that's sort of my advice.
Yeah, that's great. Well, Neil, how about you? Have you got some advice for people who have lost their dads and are dealing with that this year?
You know, I think Jenny's right. The things that come up for me are remembering what men told me about, you know, pulling out their dad's favorite music, or if he played an instrument, either playing that instrument or knowing. It's that, you know, to me what happens is that when you connect with the memory, you do something similar to crying. You may actually shed tears, but even if you don't, there's a little release that happens. It's like when you connect, then you release. So I would just suggest, even though it can be painful, pulling out those photographs, pulling out that, you know, going into the wood shop that he worked in or the garden that he worked in, and just try to be as close to him as you possibly can be.
Thanks, Neil. And how about you, Mitch, for somebody who's lost a child?
Oh, yeah, you know, I think probably the most important thing, I think, on Father's Day, I mean, especially we're talking Father's Day, lost a son or a daughter, to call other fathers, other mothers, other fathers who have experienced a loss of their own on Father's Day, and to connect with them and realize, say, I'm there for you, and I know how difficult this is. I know I got a call, I mean, from a psychic years ago, out of the blue. She had seen my book and called me on Father's Day and said that my son had come to her and wanted to wish me a happy Father's Day. You know, I was so thrilled that she took the risk to do that, to take the risk and call a father on Father's Day, and to say that, and to give a good message, but not knowing how it's going to be received. Just call people, talk to other people who have experienced a similar loss, and together we can talk about Father's Day, you know, and how tough it is and how good it can be. Now it can some days it can be a proud day, some days it can be a, like Neil said, sit down and just go through all the movies, the videos, and just immerse yourself, swim in it all. And depending what year it is, your journey down the road, and it can be a swimming experience. The second year it can be one the 10th year. The third year maybe you go out and celebrate and take someone out to lunch and say, let's celebrate Father's Day. I'm still a father. You know,
right, absolutely. Well, thank you all for being on the show today, and you can find all these folks on our Open to Hope website, and they're in our Open to Hope book. And Mitch Carmody is going to be at the Compassionate Friends National Conference with Heidi and I. And